Bill O'Reilly here. Welcome to the No Spin News, Tuesday, May 10th, 2022. Stand up for your country. This is one of those broadcasts where a pen and paper will be handy. We're going to give you very important facts. And why do you want facts? Because in your life, you're going to be speaking with people about important things. And if you are armed and dangerous with facts, you will enjoy the conversation a lot more. So by far the worst failure of the Biden administration is the economy. What a mess, all right? Most every American is losing money. Some can afford to lose the money, some can't. It is Joe Biden's fault. It's not Congress, okay? It's not Putin. It's not COVID. It's Biden. But he will never admit that. So today, he tried to save himself by giving a 29-minute speech about inflation. We will go over it in a methodical and fair manner, and that is the subject of this evening's Talking Points memo. So Biden was 30 minutes late as usual, never on time. And the reason is that he's prepping, that he's reading the teleprompter behind the scenes. They change words for him that he can't say. So it takes longer for him to get it together. Today, as I just said, he spoke for 29 minutes. He took questions, but only on inflation. So no abortion questions, nothing else, just inflation. He has a very tough, persuasive road to go down, all right, because of the facts. So today, gas prices reached an all-time high in the United States of America, $4.37 on average, all-time high. I'm going to give you the stat under Trump in a minute. So this is up, the 437, about 25 cents a quarter compared to a month ago. Just a month. Gas goes up 25 cents a gallon. Okay. Stock market, crazy, insane. All right, so the Dow Jones has decreased 12% since January 3rd, first trading day of the year. NASDAQ, 27%, a third down. Those are high-tech stocks, things like that. Most Americans have investments in their retirement accounts. So we're all losing money. When you get your statement, you're going to cry. Now, my advice, and I'll say it again, don't panic, don't do anything, ride it out. Now, that advice may be bad. I hope it isn't, but I'm doing the same thing. I'm riding it out. I had stops. I lost a lot of my stocks. That's okay. Okay, but the ones that I have, I'm holding. I'm not going to panic sell. Now, this is going to be the key issue in November. Everybody knows that. I mean, people are crazed now about abortion and all January 6th. None of that's going to matter because people's lives depend on money. It's not just in the United States. That's all over the world. You have no money. You have no power. You can starve to death. You need money. Biden's taking money away from Americans. Trump added money to Americans. Now, I don't care whether you like Trump or not. I don't care what party you're in. That is true. Here are the facts. So, under Trump, inflation ran 1.4% in the 4 years. 1.4. That was nothing. Biden, 16 months, about 10% when you add in everything. So that's an astronomical jump. So today, Biden tried to explain it. Roll the tape.
But first, I want us to be crystal clear about the problem. There are two leading causes of inflation we're seeing today. The first cause of inflation is a once-in-a-century pandemic. And this year we have a second cause. Mr. Putin's war in Ukraine. We saw in March that 60% of inflation that month was due to price increases at the pump for gasoline.
Oh, Putin did it. Okay. Before Putin invaded Ukraine, under Biden, the price of a gallon of gas had risen from $2.93 under Trump, last week of Trump. $2.93 when Trump left, to $3.75. Almost a 30% jump before Putin. Before. Why? Because Biden attacked the American energy industry. And the oil futures market, which sets the price of a barrel of oil, spiked right after that. They went, ooh, Americans are going to cut back on their oil production, so that means that the price of oil worldwide is going to go up. That's what happened. Now, Biden doesn't understand that. He doesn't know it. He just reads what they put in front of him. So the facts are, and I'll give them to you again, inflation under Trump, 1.4%, under Biden, 10%. Gasoline, $2.93, Trump left office. Before Putin, $3.75, now $4.37. So even if Putin was responsible, it's a little jump. The big jump came after Biden attacked the fossil fuel industry. Okay, we all have that. There's no dispute on these stats. Now, what's Biden going to do to bring inflation down? We'll take.
Americans have two potential paths forward. The first is my plan, the Democratic plan. Plan put forward by congressional Republicans is a second alternative. Here's how each of us would tackle inflation. My plan is to lower everyday costs for hardworking Americans, and lower the deficit by asking large corporations and the wealthiest Americans to not engage in price gouging and to pay their fair share in taxes.
Okay, that's going to do nothing. Nothing. That's just foolish. You would flunk your economics class if you wrote that in a paper to your high school or college teacher. Okay, here's my plan. Lower employer, and then that doesn't make any sense. So he goes, and lower everyday costs for everyday costs for hardworking Americans. How? How? Doesn't say. And lower the deficit by asking large corporations and the wealthy Americans not to engage in price gouging. Well, wealthy Americans don't price gouge. They are just wealthy. And to pay their fair share in tax. That means Biden wants to raise taxes when we're on the edge of a recession. This is dangerous. This isn't just stupid. This is dangerous. So we're on the edge of a recession now. The only thing keeping us falling over the cliff, as we did under Bush the Younger, you'll remember, 2008, is that most Americans are working and earning money. Now, those wages are being eroded by inflation, but they have jobs, not mass layoffs, more jobs than workers. The only thing. So now, Biden says, I want to raise taxes, fair share, that's the code, on corporations. So what happens when you raise taxes on corporations? They lay off people. Yeah, everybody knows that. Boom, over the cliff. So this guy Biden, he's dangerous. He's a danger to us, to our welfare. Now, the 80 million Americans who voted for him, most of them, of course, voting against Trump, if you don't know that now, if you can't figure out that you voted for a dangerous man, a man who's hurting you and your family, then you're either too dumb to understand anything or you're dishonest. There's no other third way. You're either too stupid to understand what's happening right now in the country economically, or you're dishonest. You think Putin is responsible for inflation and higher gas prices. I mean, I don't know anybody who thinks that. Okay. All right, under Trump, I'm going to say it again, inflation was almost non-existent. The Dow Jones, in the 4 years Trump was president, increased 51%. Okay, the NASDAQ, 125%. That was under Trump, the Trump economy, which worked for everybody. For the poorest of the poor, it worked. So that is it. There is no other issue in this country right now. That's it. Because when people get hurt, when their families are put in jeopardy because they don't have enough money to exist. They're going into debt. Whoever is in charge gets booted. And this is Biden's fault.
Look at this lead pencil. There's not a single person in the world who could make this pencil.
In Baltimore last week, President Biden summoned one of Milton Friedman's favorite metaphors to make a point about the complexity of modern supply chains.
Even products as simple as a pencil can't have to use the wood from Brazil, graphite from India, before it comes together at a factory in the United States to get a pencil.
Of course, when Milton Friedman used Leonard Read's pencil metaphor, he was using it to push back against big government intrusions into the market.
What brought them together and induced them to cooperate to make this pencil? There was no commissar sending out orders from some central office. It was a magic of the price system.
Odder still is that the last time Joe Biden referenced Friedman was in a Political article from 2020. The article closed with his assertion that Milton Friedman isn't running the show anymore. Less than a year into his presidency, Joe Biden is today presiding over the worst inflation Americans have experienced in 31 years.
We're coming on the air this morning with a brand new poll, and it's brutal for President Biden. 70% believe the economy is in bad shape. And with inflation at a 3-decade high, only 39% approve of Biden's handling of the economy.
Milton Friedman referred to inflation as a hidden tax, or taxation without representation. By this he meant that inflation acted as a tax on your earnings, but a particularly sneaky tax. It was sneaky because any nominal increase to your paycheck potentially meant sliding you into a higher tax bracket. That, coupled with day-to-day costs hit by inflation.
This is crazy.
Such as motorists in California now paying the state's highest recorded regular gasoline.
To put that into perspective, people who drive the typical mid-size sedan with a 14-gallon size fuel tank, they're paying $21 more to fill up that tank of gas today than 1 year ago.
But instead of taking inflation into account and slimming down his Build Back Better agenda, the Biden administration is doubling down.
The BBB has billions of dollars to deal with supply chain issues. Also, it's fully paid for.
When politicians start using the word free, one can only imagine what Milton Friedman would have said.
There's no such thing as a free lunch.
And yet a free lunch is exactly how Joe Biden continues to sell his multi-trillion-dollar agenda.
This is not going to cost the American public $1.
We're not going to raise taxes on anyone making under $400,000. That's a lot of money.
Friedman would likely have pointed out that with inflation, Mr. Biden is already taxing plenty of families earning less than $400,000 a year.
Inflation is just like alcoholism. In both cases, when you start drinking or when you start printing too much money, the good effects come first. The bad effects only come later.
Today, even the Obama administration's economist is concerned the situation is spiraling out of control.
I think the odds are that we're going to have inflation of a kind we haven't seen in 30 years until either the Fed takes some significant move with respect to monetary policy or until there's some kind of accident.
One thing we know, with or without Build Back Better, if inflation continues, more and more Americans are going to wish Milton Friedman really were running the show today.
When it comes to the cure, it's the other way around. When you stop drinking or when you stop printing money, the bad effects come first, and the good effects only come later. That's why it's so hard to persist with the cure.
Let me turn to the fourth of my myths, the free lunch myth. The belief that somehow or other government can spend money at nobody's expense. I don't know how many of you have ever heard of a wonderful description of government that was made by a French economist by the name of Frédéric Bastiat about 150 years ago. He said, government is that fiction whereby everybody believes that he can live at the expense of everybody else. And that is the free lunch myth. The myth that somehow or other government can provide goods and services, can spend money at nobody's expense. Now, the particular form which that myth takes is very specific. It has two parts. One part is a belief that somehow or other you can tax business without consumers or workers or individuals paying for it. Somehow business is a big source, a big cornucopia out there that can be taxed at no cost. And the other way of form the myth takes is that you can create money at no cost. That if you turn the printing press, if you produce those greenbacks, that will enable people to become richer with nobody becoming poorer. Well, let me look at first problem. Can you tax business? What's business? There's no business to be taxed. There are people. Only people can pay taxes. Can I tax this floor? Can I tax the building? The building can't pay taxes. Only people can pay taxes. So when you talk about a tax on business, it has to be paid by somebody. Either it's paid by the stockholder, or it's paid by the customer, or it's paid by the worker. There's no other way it can come from. There's no Santa Claus, no tooth fairy that's going to provide a source by which the government can spend money that doesn't come from somebody. Somebody has to pay. And yet, over and over again, you hear the claim, oh, we must not increase taxes on individuals, we'll increase taxes on business. He has to consider as part of his cost not only what he pays to the worker, but also the extra taxes he will have to pay to the government. It makes no difference to the employer at all if he pays the worker a bigger check and the worker pays a larger part of that directly to the government, or he pays the worker a smaller check, but in addition has to send a check to Washington. What matters to him is the total number of dollars it costs him to hire an additional person. So the fact is, the logic is, the reason is, that the so-called tax on the employer is paid by the employee. Now, this has always been clear from economic reasoning, general economic reasoning, but it has also been subjected to empirical test. And a book, even from that tempo of belief in greater and bigger government, the Brookings Institution in Washington, published a couple of years ago, demonstrated empirically that the tax on the employer was really paid by the employee, that it was shifted to the employee, and it can't be any other way, as you will see if you think about it. So business doesn't pay that tax. And yet, despite this, you have the great move in Congress right now in remedying the problem of Social Security to impose a larger fraction of the tax on business on the alleged grounds that somehow or other that spares the worker. It doesn't have any such effect. It reduces the incentive to hire people and thus is imposed on the worker. But again, if you look at the taxing corporate profits, the distinction you have to draw is between who writes the check and who fundamentally bears the cost. It may well be that an official of a corporation writes the check for the tax on profits, so-called profits. He writes the check, but who pays it? He doesn't pay it. Here is a poor fellow who may be earning a modest competence. He may be writing a check for $10 million. That isn't coming out of his hide. Where's that $10 million coming from? It has to come from the proceeds of the goods and services which the enterprise sells. And that $10 million is $10 million less available either for cutting prices or for paying out dividends or for paying wages and salaries. The tax is borne by people. And for this reason, I must say, I have always myself been strongly in favor of eliminating altogether the tax on corporations. So it's open and above board that you are taxing people and that you do not conceal that fact by appearing to tax corporations. Well, again, with respect to money, can you print money at no cost? It's very cheap to turn out those pieces of paper. But does that get society something for nothing? Not at all. It's simply a different form of taxation. If you print money, People have more money to spend. If they spend more money on the same amount of goods, prices go up. And in effect, everybody is paying a tax through inflation. Once again, it's only a form of taxation.